In today's episode, we speak with David Burkus. He's a best-selling author, The Myths of Creativity, and his new book, Under New Management.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. David Burkus is a best-selling author, an award-winning podcaster, and professor of management at Oral Roberts University. His latest book, Under New Management, challenges the traditional and widely accepted principles of business management and proves that they are outdated, outmodeled, and simply don't work. And he also reveals what does. He's delivered keynotes to the leaders of the Fortune 500 companies and the future leaders of the United States Naval Academy. David is a regular contributor to the Harvard Business Review and Inc. magazine. Well, David, thank you for joining us today. I know the listeners are going to get a lot out of today's show. Let's just dive in. Your bio is amazing, but let's just dive in a little bit. I've got a question about your first book, The Myth of Creativity. Tell us a couple of the things that you learned that you just were kind of amazed at.
Yeah, so the myths of creativity, let me set it up like this. The stories that we tell ourselves are true even if they're not true. And that doesn't just apply to creativity, that applies to everything. I mean, that applies to peak performance. Whatever story you tell yourself about how the world works and how performers work is going to be true because you tell it to yourself over and over and over again. You believe it, right? So in the realm of creativity, really what we're looking at is a variety of different stories that people share about how creativity is supposed to work. And this is people that would call themselves creative and sort of non-creatives, right? In other words, a lot of times you get people who do work in a creative field, and so in order to feel special about themselves, they tell stories that they were, blessed from the gods, or that they have this genetic ability as a creative. And then a lot of times people who don't work in those fields, who get out of practice and uncomfortable around new ideas, they tell themselves a story that, that creative person, that exceptional creative, there's something unique about them that I don't have. And this was really the story that we wanted to take on head on. So we actually divided into 10 myths that sort of span from an individual approach to where do ideas come from, to how is it supposed to work when we do it in teams, all sorts of myths and misconceptions around how the creative process works. I think probably one of the most interesting ones that I found in the research was one of the opening myths. I call it the eureka myth. This idea that great insights are that light bulb moment, that eureka moment, that Newton in the apple moment, right? And interestingly enough, actually, I can't find any real record of Newton in the apple ever happening. I can find stories that sound a lot like it, but I can't find any incident of that actually happening. So what we do find is that we've all had those moments, the sort of aha feeling. And so when we dive into the research on what's going on there, it turns out that those are usually because that project we were working on was preceded, that aha moment is preceded by a period of what we call incubation. In other words, I'm going to step back from the project. I'm going to let the subconscious go to work while I focus on other things. And the truth is, psychologically, we don't actually know what happens in the subconscious. That's why it's called the subconscious. If we knew what was happening, we'd call it the conscious, right? So we don't actually know what's happening, but we do know, and the research supports this, that you have more and you have better ideas when you take that period of incubation. So even for me in my workflow, I mean, I come from this kind of mentality and upbringing that you sort of grind it out, right? You hustle and grind like a million different Facebook and Instagram memes I've seen out there. And while that's true, if you're looking for a real breakthrough idea, you also have to build incubation and rest time to your workflow. Otherwise, you're never going to get it.
Interesting. Let me ask you a question. One of the things that I've been doing is instead of jumping right out of bed, I get up at 4:59 every day, but I've been delaying getting out of bed for a few minutes. And I'm amazed at the amount of creativity, ideas, and solutions that are coming to me first thing in the morning. Did any of your research touch on any of this?
So I'd be willing to bet, too, that they are also happening right before you fall asleep. but you don't. You obviously can't capture them, because if you do that, then you won't be able to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so I don't know of a specific study that says anything about 4:59. I'm actually curious. I want to hear why you picked 4:59. But
well, I want to beat all the slackers that are waiting till 5 o'clock to get
5 in the morning. How Elrod, you be darned with your 5 a.m. miracle morning. I'm going to do 4:59 and beat you. Yeah.
This is Peak Performers Podcast, remember?
I love it. So what it brings to mind is there's a lot of research on self-censoring and on inhibition, and this idea that, so I'll give you a similar example. There's a really fascinating study that shows if you give people some alcohol, not up to like the legal limit where they can't drive, but almost up to it, they'll actually do better on tests of creative thinking. And the reason has nothing to do with alcohol. That's not the magic thing. It's just that's one of many things that lowers our inhibitions, that lowers our self-censoring. So we have this fascinating thing that's in our brains, the prefrontal cortex. It's literally like the front piece of the brain, and it's responsible for a lot of higher level thinking, including censoring things so we don't say stupid stuff that gets us fired or makes our spouse or kids angry, or writes off our friends. Anytime you've ever had an emotion and you can catch yourself from sharing that, that's your prefrontal cortex at work, helping you inhibit some thoughts. Well, it turns out that kind of turning that down to creativity. So my guess is what's going on at 4:59 in the morning is that as you're waking up, you're a little more inhibited. You're a little bit more sort of free flowing and less self-monitoring than you will be once you've showered and brushed your teeth and gotten your coffee or Red Bull or whatever you're drinking at 5:01 in order to stay awake that early in the morning. So that would be my guess on what that sort of suggests. Again, we could totally run a whole study on 4:59, but that'd be my guess of what's going on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll also work with business executives, and as we're working through problem solving, I'll have them take out a piece of paper and they'll start writing down what they think the issue is, and without fail, they'll get to one thing and they'll stop. They won't write it down, or they'll cross it out. I'm like, wait a second. That's where the magic is. The things that we try to censor sometimes are the very things that are the answer.
No, absolutely. And this is one of the reasons that Alex Osborne, the guy who created brainstorming, and we've all been in a good brainstorming session and we've probably been in a lot of bad ones, but one of the primary rules is this idea that no idea is a bad idea. It's not that every idea is valid. That's not true. Some ideas really are terrible. It's that if you're shooting down ideas as they're coming up, you're spending too much thinking on the monitoring piece. And you're not only are you shooting down other people's ideas, but you're encouraging other people to self-monitor so they don't say embarrassing things. And what you need is the exact opposite. You need them to have the freedom and the confidence to say whatever they want so that they can throw out a bunch of bad ideas in the service of the good idea. And what's really funny is often, especially when you deal with executives, you find that, a creative idea has to be new and it has to be useful. And a lot of times we cross out new ideas because we can't immediately see how they're useful. And like you said, an outsider can look at that and go, no, that's where the brilliance lies. But the person in your own mind, because it's such a new idea, it departs from your past experiences, it can be really hard to see that as new and useful. You're just seeing it as totally not useful.
Yeah, it's funny. I worked for a guy in New York early in my career back in the 80s. And he goes, man, you have so many bad ideas. He goes, I just got to keep you around, though, because occasionally you come up with a brilliant one, and I don't know which one it's going to be.
No, that's exactly right. I could write a book of all sorts of amazing things to say about Google and their creative process, but I could also fill a book with all of the projects that they've come up with and developed that they totally shuttered because they weren't actually all that good idea. Google Plus comes to mind, right? But yeah. And that's the idea is you ship out a lot of stuff if it's in brainstorming session or even individual ideation coming up with that. You ship out a lot of different ideas and not worry about whether they're good or they're bad. That's in a different stage in the process. When you're just trying to flow with it, when it's 4:59 in the morning, you're not really judging they're good or bad. And because of that, you're throwing out a bunch of different ideas, and you've got a better shot of, when you sift through them, of finding a really, really good one.
Yeah, and it might lead to something else. It may not be in the exact form, but it'll prompt you to think of something else or be creative in another area.
Oh, totally. So now we're talking about one of my favorite things, which is that all ideas are combinations of pre-existing ideas, right? Solomon was right. There's nothing new under the sun. Or as Kirby Ferguson, the author of a really awesome video series by this title, says, everything is a remix. And so a lot of times that service, those bad ideas, they actually can serve us more than we think because of exactly what you said. That idea by itself might be bad, but if I take it and I combine it with 3 or 4 other things, I get to the place where I have the right combination of ideas to find a winner. And it's only by combining those things. It's one of the reasons we need those bad ideas. It's also one of the reasons that the most creative people are also voracious consumers of others' creativity. So the best writers are voracious readers. The best directors are amazing viewers of films. Right? Quentin Tarantino has probably seen more movies than anybody else in the universe. And the reason for that is they're feeding their stimulus with lots and lots and lots of ideas so that they can come up with new and original combinations to get at the really good ones.
Interesting. David, give us an idea how you get everything done. You're a professor, you're a speaker, you're an author. How do you get everything done?
I mean, I guess you're being generous in saying that I do get everything done. I probably end most days thinking, oh, I forgot to do this, etc. Yeah, so to give you the rough answer, my system kind of works like this. I have inspiration time and then I have perspiration time. Not that inspiration time is all that much, but what I mean is, and this kind of comes from my research in the myth of creativity, and it's kind of affected my workflow, is I have systems in place. It's Evernote, it's Dropbox, it's a reading list in Safari. It's a bunch of different buckets that I can throw new material I want to read or new ideas I come up with. And so those all get thrown into one. And then when I have the space to actually do the work, whether it's writing a new talk, whether it's working on a chapter of a book, writing an article, whatever it is that I'm kind of dedicated to that day, I'm not that person that's just staring at Microsoft Word or Pages and going, oh my gosh, I have no idea what to say. I have no thought. And I look at the cursor and I understand the reason it's called cursor is you just want to curse at it, right? That doesn't happen because I've got this bucket of stuff I can pull from and go, oh yeah, I remember reading that study and I really wanted to write a piece about it. So I'll grab it, I'll put it in front of me and I'll work from that. So that's really a lot of it. I don't actually believe in like writer's block or creative blocks or anything like that. Really what I believe in is that people who experience that probably aren't controlling their stimulus, probably aren't finding a way to capture the ideas that they have so that when they have the time, and I wish I had more of it, which is why I laughed when you said in the beginning, but when they do have the time to get the work done, they're not also trying to think of something. That happens at a different moment, gets captured, and then when you're ready to actually grind, you can just pull right from that inspiration file and start working.
So speaking of which, where do you do your best thinking?
I probably... where do I do my best thinking? I probably do my best thinking in the classroom, and here's what I mean by that. When I am running a class at the university, I'm usually going over, the organizational behavior class that I just started, where I started teaching it 2 weeks ago. It's the same every fall, right? I know what week we're covering, what subject. The textbook doesn't change all that much, but I'm always reading new and other things. And so what's really interesting is as I'm in the middle of a lecture, kind of the intent is for it to be the same lecture as the week before, or the year before, but I now have this new information, this new thing I was reading about, et cetera, and it just kind of comes out, right? So you're just kind of talking about this subject, and you're like, oh, and you know what? There's a great example of that over here, right? And then of course it's finding a way to capture that. So to give you an idea, like the new book, Under New Management, basically came out because I'm lecturing on all these organizational behavior, organizational psychology topics, and then I'm also reading about in Business Insider about how Netflix just went to unlimited vacation, and oh, wait a minute, that's actually a great example of this concept of trust from this researcher, et cetera. And so once I find a way to kind of capture all of that, then when it came time to writing, that was sort of easy because I'd already sort of made the connections really via lecture. So that's probably where, at least for my work, I do my best thinking. I know that's unique to me. Not everybody is a part-time writer, part-time professor, but I think there is something to the idea of talking out your ideas, finding another person or group of person to really bounce certain things off of and see what connections gets made, and then really being able to get real-time feedback on whether or not you've stumbled into something that is a great example and will make a great piece, or if they give you all of this weird feedback and odd, confused looks, you had one of those bad ideas that you need to slug through in order to get to the good ones.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. Saying yes to things is so important, and what we say yes, of course, defines what we're able to do and what we're not able to do. How do you define what you say yes to and what you don't?
I actually I default to no, really, to be honest with you.
I knew that answer already, because if you're getting everything done that you have to, and that's the point that I want to touch on, is that so many people continue to get into this rut of saying yes and yes and yes, and then they never get to the good stuff. So saying no is so important.
I really used to believe in time management. I really used to believe in like Covey's 4-box model and important. But then the other thing I found out is that I'm a terrible judge of what's important and what's urgent and what's not important and what's urgent and et cetera. And that system just doesn't work for me. I don't really believe in time management, other than like when I'm teaching at the university. I obviously have to be in the room at a certain time. But for the majority of the week, it's more about priorities than it is about time management. So one of the things that my wife and I do at the beginning of the year is we disappear for a couple of days. We get a babysitter for the kids, and we just kind of go through the past year, new year, et cetera. The most important thing that comes out of that isn't vision or conversations for vacation, et cetera. It's a list of priorities. What are my priorities? Faith and family first, then really, actually, I shouldn't admit this in public, but then my writing and my speaking, then the university commitments, then a couple other things. And really, it's a question of that. It's making sure I've got time for the top priorities. It means saying no to lots of different stuff, right? So, I'll give you an example of that. Like most guys my age who grow up in America, I like golf. It's a really fun sport. I love walking around on a nice day. But I gave away my clubs probably 4 years ago. And the reason is that I also love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And both of those are very time-intensive sports. And I came to the conclusion that, I don't have enough room in this golf one. It keeps going down to the bottom of the priority list. So I don't have enough room for it. So I'm just going to give it up. And any time spent doing that was time spent not doing jiu-jitsu. And it's not like I was going to steal jiu-jitsu from family time or work time. So I needed to kind of say no to stuff in order to be able to fit the top priorities in there. And I'm not ashamed about it. I'm probably an absolutely terrible golfer now because I've been so far out of practice. But that's okay. I'm still pretty decent at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's an amazing sport. I have a guest coming on in a few weeks that is the coach for the MMA fighter Cupcake. I don't know where.
Yeah.
I don't know where first. And I'm so looking forward to understanding the mindset of the fighters. I mean, just fascinating what they're able to put their bodies through.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I don't really like getting punched in the face, which is why I like the jiu-jitsu and the wrestling element of it. But there are so many ways that it influences your life, in the sense that, so a great example, when any practice has some instruction time, and then we have what we call rolling, which is that sort of live sparring, actually wrestling, et cetera. And there's a really weird thing that happens in that, which is the clock starts, and for 5 minutes, I am trying to choke you unconscious or break one of your bones. Actually, I'm trying to get you to the point where you realize that, so you tap out, because I don't want to do it. But then, I've been doing it long enough that if I tap somebody out, I then kind of explain to them how that happened. We go back, we reach this, and I teach them. And the same thing when someone does it to me. If I get caught in a position because I make a mistake, somebody actually points it out. And this is the thing. Maybe it's because I'm a writer first, but this is one of the weird things I've found about a lot of business. Like in my business, I certainly have competitors, right? You can buy my book or you can buy somebody else's book, although a lot of people buy both, which is awesome. Or you can book me for a speech, or you can book somebody else for a speech that talks about a similar topic. These people are supposed to be my competitors, but not unlike being on the floor in a jiu-jitsu mat, being on the mats. They are competitors, but then they also are helping you get better. They're also friends. They're also people who we bounce ideas off of, and we grow together. So it's this sort of fierce but friendly rivalry that makes all of us better, and we all know we need that in order to get better. It's a weird dynamic, but you see it play out in life just like it does on the jiu-jitsu mat.
Yeah, there's plenty of room for everybody. Just be the best you that you can be, and help people along the way.
Totally.
What would you try if you knew you could not fail?
What would I try? Well, I don't know. So I have a 4-year-old and I have a 2-year-old. So I guess I feel like I'm failing as a parent all the time. So I would probably try all those things you read in parenting books about, this tool or this routine is supposed to work, et cetera. Because I would love for any of them to work. But like we were just talking about, the truth is you sort of have to fail your way into figuring out what works for your kids. So that would probably be what I would try. I wish there were models out there that really did apply 100% of the time, and then I would try those. Yeah. I know that's not the typical answer you're looking for, but that's where my thinking is God, I wish there were. I mean, even with the time management and Covey thing, I stumbled upon my own thing because that model didn't work. But it would be so much easier if I could just readily adopt that model and make it work 100% of the time.
Yeah, and I've got 2 kids as well, and one boy and one girl, and they're so different. And you just kind of figure out with one, and then it's like apply it to the other one. It's like, nope, that didn't work. Nope, that didn't work. And then finally someone said, why don't you just ask them what they want? I'm like, that's interesting. And I did.
Yeah, there's a model.
There's a model. Ask them what they want and then go give it to them. And actually my son said that he wanted to be understood and he wanted to be heard. I'm like, wow. And I'm like, I don't do that. Maybe I should start doing that. As soon as I started doing that, life was much easier.
Yeah.
That's totally the extent of my parenting advice. So what's some of the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've probably ever received, I sort of received secondhand. So one of my intellectual heroes, and I've had the chance to interview him a couple times and talk with him. And so we've talked about this idea, but I first was exposed to it through one of his books. There's a guy named Roger Martin. He was the former dean at the Rotman School, really actually turned the Rotman School, which is the business school of the University of Toronto, from something nobody's ever heard of to one of the top business schools in North America inside of a period of about 15 years. And he has this book he calls The Opposable Mind. And what it is essentially the how-to of the George Bernard Shaw quote that a genius is somebody that can hold opposing thoughts in their mind and not go crazy. He really looks at a lot of those different ideas that we have all these mental models, and often they sort of are opposing, that we can only be this or we can only be that, right? So I'll give you an idea or an example in the world of strategy, which is Martin's forte. In the world of corporate strategy, you can go a low-cost strategy, which is, you're trying to be Walmart, you're trying to be the one that has the lowest priced product, or you can go a differentiation strategy, which is you're trying to find a niche and you're trying to get that niche to see that you're worth the extra price because you're custom tailored towards that particular niche. But some companies have figured out how to do both. And that's really weird, right? When you can be better, but also cheaper at the same time. And it starts from that mentality that just because these things have always been presented as either or, as two different models, doesn't mean they won't always be that way. So that idea that models are our best attempts at explaining the world, and when two of them are set in opposition to each other, that might not actually be true. We've got to have the courage to try it out and see if there's a way we can blend the two. That's probably the best advice I've ever received.
Being a peak performer is all about execution. Think of those people that you know that you consider peak performers. Some have had great plans, some are really smart, some just have natural talent, and others are highly educated. But the one thing that they all have in common, and I don't even know who you're thinking about, they all know how to execute. If they can't execute, they would not be considered a peak performer. Everybody has dreams, but peak performers actually execute them. This applies on the field, in athletics, or in the boardroom. If you're a business owner, a coach, an entrepreneur, or a corporate executive, and you're frustrated and tired of knowing what to do, but you just can't seem to get it all done, or your results are inconsistent, or maybe you're really good at execution, but your team doesn't know how to execute. Are you missing budget? Are you working 80 hours a week and it seems like you're just banging your head up against the wall every day? I know I've been there. Are you not making the kind of money that you want and deserve? I have a program that just might be the answer for you. This program is not for everyone. We go deep, we get raw, we get real. But if you're truly committed to mastering execution and for the first time truly being able to execute on what you know, as opposed to just trying to figure out more information and looking for that secret, we will teach you to become a master of execution. We'll teach you the science of getting things done. Simply take your phone and text the word BE Summit, one word, to 41411. That's Business Execution Summit. The keyword, BE Summit, that's what you text, and text it to 41411. Remember, it's not what you know. It's not even who you know. It's about what you're able to execute. That's what truly matters. Don't let another month, another quarter, or another year slip by with just average results. Text today. That concludes part 1 of our interview with David Burkus. Please tune in later this week for part 2. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already done so, please head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Also, please share this with family, friends, coworkers, or anyone that could benefit from this information. To make it very easy to share these episodes, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode that you want to share, and you can post it to your timeline. You just might be helping one of your friends on Facebook by sharing it on your page. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. The email is info@thorconklin. While at the website, please sign up for our weekly newsletter with additional tricks, tips, tools, and psychology on how to be a peak performer. Remember, these episodes are anywhere between 6 and 35 minutes and are meant to be consumed during dot time doing other things. Until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.